911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send
Protesters
additional
are outside
trucks.
of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on one.
to
Hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lifeline 911 Podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I am your co-host, Gary, and today we are going to be talking about consistency.
Dun, dun, dun.
The C word.
Yeah.
Consistency is always sort of a boogeyman, I guess, of any large enough agency.
Yeah.
Because you've got people that are working across multiple shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year.
Yep.
And trying to maintain the consistency, the same level of quality and the same procedures that are used across all those shifts can be a real nightmare, I think.
Oh, yeah. Or almost an impossibility sometimes, or at least it seems that way.
Especially if you happen to work in an environment that is sort of ever-changing.
Really?
Yeah, with new rules and procedures that come out.
What?
Yeah, it can be a real challenge. So how can a department, be it police, fire, or EMS, try and have consistency in sort of their 911, their dispatching operations?
You know, when you find out,
I'll write a book about
let
it.
me know. Because it seems to be, I've worked at a couple of agencies. I've worked at this one, another, and now this one again. And I've got friends in the industry, and they all complain about the same thing. They all say we can't seem to become consistent. And it doesn't matter if it's day shift, night shift, evening shift, or somewhere in between. And no matter the discipline, between call taking or dispatching or fire, EMS, whatever, they all complain about the same thing. And I don't have the answer to that, but I don't have the answer that says it's going to, the answer that's going to fix it all. But I do know you got to have some stuff written down some places.
Yep, that is, policy and procedure is very important. Because I'll say, I've had several different jobs in my life, but none of them have ever had the issue of consistency like this job has. So, when I was a cashier, all the cashiers pretty much cashiered the same way.
The same way, yeah.
And I think that was due in part to back in the day, stores weren't open 24/7. I guess they're not anymore either.
Not anymore.
But, so you didn't have a 24-hour clock that you had to worry about.
Yeah.
And also the job was just more, it was much simpler. There were not as many moving pieces. You grabbed a can of peas, you drug it across the screen, it beeped. If it didn't beep, you'd drag it again,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and, if you're a good checker, you go fast and talk to the people. But, all you got to do is make the thing beep.
Right. Yeah.
And then we also had to, scan their checks, which were little pieces of paper. Anyway, that's a whole other story.
That would go around little thing, and you slide it in, and it would zoom.
Yep.
Oh, I thought those were so cool.
They,
Anyway.
Yeah, they really were.
Okay.
Little tiny scanners.
Right, we got off a little bit. But
we
okay.
did. But, yeah, you have, it's a much simpler operation. When you're talking about things like police, fire, EMS, both call taking and dispatching, you've got so many moving parts because you've got different policies and procedures that are coming from, local, from state, from county, federal.
And sometimes federal.
Yeah, and these things change things. Tim's Law is a good example of one that just kind of happened in terms of reporting missing persons.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of paired with Suzanne's Law.
Yep.
And that is something that changes policy and procedure and can sometimes change a lot of policy and procedure. Or, you've got, it could be so many different things that can change it. And like there's since there's so many interconnected parts, how can you even hope to have any sort of consistency across, different divisions and shifts?
To be honest, I think about a job that I had when I was in between agencies, and it was a customer service, and they had a QA department, and I'm thinking about consistency, right, and how they were able to cause their agents to behave almost like Stepford in a way. No, I'm serious.
Okay.
And the way they were able to do that is because they had a whole division that was their whole job, was to listen to calls and monitor live. They had no other job. That's it. And they were able to gain a level of consistency that I have not seen since.
Okay.
But that's, again, because they had a quality assurance whole division. We don't have one.
No. And I'm sure most agencies out there,
I don't know if they do or don't.
especially smaller ones.
Probably don't.
Yeah, because the other agency you worked at was also a fairly big one.
Yeah.
Did you guys over there have a QA team? Yeah.
Not a whole
'Cause
team.
Generally in government, you're not going to have extra resources to devote to things like that a lot of times.
Yeah. But that's how, at least in my, in this conversation, I'm thinking that is how we have so many things slip through the cracks, because as the agency that is the size that we are, there's no way to QA everyone as often as we would like to or need to catch all of the individuality
Yes.
that tends to pop up in what we do. And you're going to have that because you've got varying tenure, age, work experience, maturity.
Yeah. Mental stability.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, when you have all of that and you put it in a room the size of ours and varying shifts, you're going to have differences.
Sure.
I don't know if inconsistency is really a fair word,
Okay.
because to me, when I hear that word, I want to do it my way, or I'm just choosing not to be in line with everything else. It just seems to have a negative connotation to it,
Okay.
to me.
Fair enough.
But I think it's just inevitable in this environment. I think the best we can do is continually push out our policies. This is where our leadership has to lock arms and get on the same page, and constantly putting out the information to our people so that they can have the freshest, most relevant information at the same time, or consistently, if
Yeah.
you will. I know, right? I don't know that there's a formula or a fix-it for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you introduce the human element, especially over so our department has upwards of 175 people in it, so it's really challenging to try and get everybody on the same page with everything. So a couple of weeks ago, we were talking with Versaterm, and I was just thinking about how when you input data into Versaterm, it always will come out very homogeneous because it's the computer doing it. So if we had something like a ProQA system, which many fire and EMS departments use, we don't use that for our police department, though, because that ProQA is basically you ask question one, and then depending on question one, it's got a card you flip to, and then you ask question two, and then it's like a choose your own adventure kind of.
Kind of like that, and it will, based on the answer, it shunts you this way and that way. And actually, there are protocols. That's what they call that. Protocols for police also. And there are agencies out there that use it.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we had something like that, forced the entry of data in a particular way, that would help with the consistency, but
Sure.
you also kind of lose that human element to make decisions on what question will be next.
Right.
And how am I going to ask that?
Yeah. And I've heard the argument for and I've heard the argument against. Definitely for is it removes, well, not removes complete. It doesn't remove it completely, but it does diminish the possibility of errors, if you will, because the machine or the protocol, the software is dictating the next question. And the answer to the next question prompts the next question. And you're right, it removes that. I'm struggling. I don't know how I feel about that. But I can see the benefit.
Yeah. But I mean, just in terms of like increasing consistency, because you want, I think what most people would want would be a fairly uniform way in which people, 911 operators would ask the questions, input the data, and then dispatchers would give that out and relay it to the officers. And as you said, kind of like having a whole Department of QA team is usually not super feasible for most agencies.
Right.
So typically I think that kind of falls back on like the supervisory staff or the
Yeah.
training staff to kind of check how people are taking calls and what mistakes are being made and things that they can improve on and what successes were had. So it's important and critical to continue to check that, because you need a quality assurance if you're going to ever hope to have any consistency, because policies will
Agreed.
change all the time.
Yeah. And especially in an agency the size of ours, because, I mean, we have roughly 32, I think, 31, 32 911 operators on our shift alone. And getting more, because we're continually hiring and trying to reach our full strength of 105,
105,
six,
yeah.
something like that. So in order to keep them developing and becoming more and more consistent in the way that they take their calls, because their skill sets are new, relatively new. They haven't been cemented, right? And they're ever growing and changing. We are challenged with coming up with ways to not only monitor them, but and critique them, but at the same time grow them.
Yes, yeah.
And we are not nearly as many as they are.
True. Yeah. It's like, if you have like two parents and they've got like, 12 kids, a la
Then
cheaper
what?
by the dozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Exactly. And so let me think, to the 31, 32, and who knows how many are coming next week, to the staff of leadership on our shift is how many? 3 soups.
7.
7.
And then that 31, that's not even counting the dispatch side. That's just the call taker side.
That's just the call takers.
So-
And then however many other things that we, along with the things that we have to do, we have to attempt to bring some consistency. Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge, but I think that if you can get to a level of consistency where you feel confident that no matter what time of the day, what day of the week, the call is going in,
Yeah.
it's going to be answered in a relatively similar manner,
Yeah.
And we do have sort of help with that, because we, like in our SOPs, it says, ask questions about location first and then
Sure.
move on to like any weapons, And so if you're following that, it can start to try and give you some consistency, because you'll know for each particular type of call, what questions you need to ask.
That's true. And I think another thing that will help is your team knowing that you are always available for clarification. And that speaks to, being available.
Yeah.
And how you respond when they come to you with questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's important that they know that they can, and that no question is too foolish, or they're not going to get the answer of you should already know that, even though that might be true.
But sometimes I hear a lot are, well, that's a different answer than I got on a different shift,
Okay.
which is always a little bit of a challenge to hear. Now, granted, there are going to be some things that are different from shift to shift in terms of policy. Like
Right.
On night shift, a lot of the like detective desks are going to be closed because they're only open during business hours. But by and large, most of the policy is going to be the exact same for how you do things. So
Sure.
how would an agency try and make sure that the answers that are being given to the employees when they ask them of their leadership team, that those answers are accurate and consistent?
Then that's a leadership thing.
Mm-hmm.
We would have, and speaking from leadership, we would have to make it our mission to know our policies and know our procedures and be abreast of the changes when they come, and then funnel that down to our people. That's one of the responsibilities that we have.
Mm-hmm.
If we hope to bring as much consistency as is realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It starts there.
Yeah, and as you kind of said earlier, write it down. Like make sure it's written down somewhere. So
Yeah.
Our agency, as I'm sure almost every agency out there, you've got your policy and procedure manual that's got about an inch of dust on it, and then somebody like has the most recent email from such and such, and like this is the most recent one we have, so this is our policy.
Yeah.
And then somebody else is like, no, I have an email from this person.
Yeah.
That came out 2 weeks later. So also a big part of consistency is making sure that your manuals, your operation procedures, all of that are kind of kept updated, because if anybody on any shift at any time can go to that and find the answer that they're looking for,
Yeah.
then that is also how you can build consistency.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, because people may change their answers, but what's written down is going to be what's written down.
Yeah, that is the rule, and it should be somewhere that no matter who they get an answer from, they should be able to they should be able to fact check that answer.
Mm-hmm.
And how do they do that?
Right.
Where it's written down.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's floating around in the cosmos somewhere, that's
Some
not
email,
going to
some
do
memo.
it. Yeah, some memo, and that is another thing about our business is things change all the time. I mean, based on what happened with this call last month, we might get a new policy.
Yeah.
And next month it might change yet again because something else happened.
It might even change back to the way it was.
back
and
to
that's
the way it
really
was.
confusing.
Yeah.
That's the worst.
It is so true.
And then throw on top of that, our agency, as I'm sure like many agencies across the country, have been really working to hire to get their staff levels back to where they need to be.
Yeah.
So you've got all of these brand new people who've been trained, have gone through training just recently, and hopefully they're hearing information that's consistent across the training team, their trainer, and then their supervisors when they're cut loose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to just be completely lost.
Yep.
And those poor little trainees always, can have a lot of trouble with that.
They really can, and you can see the look of confusion on their face. They're just like, okay. They just look confused.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're going to have, and I don't want to be the naysayer. That's not what I mean when I say you're going to have some of that. But I think it's almost impossible to avoid having it on some level. I think the best that we can do is attempt to manage it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, as we said before, like when you involve people in anything, it's going to get a little messy.
Yep.
And that's okay, because with that messiness also comes their creativity, their ingenuity.
Yeah.
But when you do have that element of inconsistency, because I think it's like this, or no, I think it's like that, or I'm reading it like this, the policy, you can sometimes get a little bit different answers. But as long as you're kind of staying pretty consistent with how you do things, you can start to build a sense of consistency. So no matter when somebody's working, they'll feel like I'm part of the same team.
Sure. And I'm going to say it again. I think that is a leadership problem. Mm-hmm. That is a leadership responsibility, because as a public safety entity, we do things pretty much the same across all of our shifts, because inherently we're answering 911 calls and we're dispatching 911 calls.
Yep.
So there's only so many ways you can do that. You can't go too far off the beaten path and not still get it done. You're still going to know, Austin 911, do you need police, fire, EMS, or mental health services? I don't really know how many different ways you can do that.
Right, yeah. There's going to be something within that.
We got the same CAD system and the same phone. So there are certain things it's going to be consistent, because that's just the way we do it. But I think the responsibility for leadership is in the messaging and managing the message. That, yes, it's okay to have a little different answer, but it should only be a little different. It shouldn't be completely foreign to me. It shouldn't be an answer that does not even look anything like the question that I asked you. Based on what day of the week, who I asked, and what shift.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I think that having, shift meetings, like in person, is so important, because everybody can be present in the room together as a shift and get the same information, rather than, having to hunt people down and talk to them about this new policy, because, 2 days may go by before you can get to the next person, and the policy may have shifted.
Yep.
So the first person you talk to is going to have that original policy down, but not the updates that just came out. So if you can get everybody in the same room together, it is a ginormous hassle to do that sometimes, but I think that's another good key to consistency.
Yeah, because everybody can ask their questions in real time. You can clear up. You don't have the telephone game happening.
Yeah.
Because you've got some people have access to the bulletins on their phones because they have their email on their phone. Some don't. And some people don't look at their emails very well or very often. We've got a couple of those where I'm like, did you see the email? I haven't checked my email in a week. Okay, that's
a problem.
That's a problem.
Even if they're at work, they still don't check them.
Yes, exactly. And so you got all this information floating around out there, and then some people see the emails and they go, "Did you hear about the new policy? Oh no, I haven't seen it. What does it say?" And there you go.
Yeah, and then you're off to the races.
And they're improv, and they're paraphrasing, and before you know it, it's just this whole policy. You're like, what is this? And where did it come from?
Yep. And then that person will tell somebody else.
And here we go.
Yeah. It's literally a game of telephone.
Yep.
So, you want to, try and avoid that in order to build consistency with how people perceive the policies and understand them and how they're implementing them.
Yeah.
Because that'll also build cohesion with your team, because I've seen firsthand people be like, I have no idea what we're doing, because, I get different answers from everybody and I have different emails from people. So I don't even know what I'm doing on this. So they have to just figure out the best way through a situation when it comes up. And, they shouldn't have to do that.
No, they shouldn't. But I don't feel too sorry for them in that we're all professionals and we are problem solvers, because that's what we do every day, all day. And if we've done our job, then we've instilled at least enough information where they can make a judgment. They can make a decision, and then we can work on the clarification later.
Yeah, because
I'm never going to say that inconsistency is an excuse for you to just go rogue.
No, I mean,
or make poor decisions.
Everybody should, have, every department has, SOPs, standard operating procedures that they operate within, and you have latitude to, as a call taker or a dispatcher, to act within those policies as you see fit. And anytime, since the time I started having employees that report to me, I've always told them, hey, as long as you're doing something within those SOPs and you can demonstrate to me there was a neuron firing somewhere between your left and your right ear, I'll back you on that.
Yeah.
But it just creates a bit of hesitation sometimes
Sure,
with people.
and I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's better when that's not the case. But I think it's still a matter of leadership also, that we instill the trust in them that even if the water is a little muddy, I can still support your decisions based on the information that you have in front of you, even if it's not as clear as it should be.
No, I agree. But yeah, so QA teams, very important,
Yeah.
whether that's a dedicated team or just supervisors or, their leadership staff doing it.
Yeah,
Having policies written down,
written down where they can find them.
yes, and updated. So
Yes.
like it doesn't say like 2011 on some of the policies.
Or in a format that the employees cannot accidentally
Yeah. You wanted like a
lock.
non editable format. I
Yes, you do.
suppose.
Yes.
These are all things that help build consistency, which builds, efficiency and cohesion.
No, you do the best you can with it and know that we have not arrived when it comes to having no inconsistency or recognizing that inconsistency it's not the same as not having the same answer. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, I think some people figure inconsistency and incompetence are not the same thing.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree to that.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Because I think that's where I was trying to go with that because, well, we're incompetent because we don't get the same answer every time we ask so-and-so to say, no, that's not necessarily true. Know the difference between inconsistency and incompetence and chaos. They're not all the same.
Yeah. And a lot of times there'll be a consistent reason for getting maybe an inconsistent answer.
Yes.
So just subtle differences in how, the either the situation arises. So you might have two very similar situations that have wildly different answers, and that may be correct.
Yeah.
Just based on some small change.
Two things can be true at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So got to have faith.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, we appreciate you having faith in us and for listening to our podcast this week. If you have any questions on consistency, please feel free to shoot us an email. From everyone at Lifeline 911 Podcast, I'm Gary.
I'm Erica.
And we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.